Villager. The rain has not stopped. For 3 days, it was like the sky was crying. When my father said, "This rain is not a good omen," I didn't pay much attention. My father was always like that. He read nature like a book and sensed disaster in advance. But that night, I wish I had believed him more. Farmer, as if out of breath. It was night. The children were asleep. My wife turned to me and said, "Something is strange." Her words were so calm and yet so frightening that something inside me broke. Then, I heard this sound. It was like a monster rising from the ground. An explosion, a crackling. It was coming from the dam. My heart seemed to stop. When I opened the door and looked out, I saw darkness rising over the village. It was a wall of water, huge, angry, and coming towards us. Villager, trembling voice, panicked. I heard our neighbours shouting, "Run!" But where to run? It was like death was coming at us from all directions. I hugged the children. My wife cried out, "I won't leave them." I just looked at her and said, "We will be together no matter what happens." But were these words comfort, or an empty lie? Villager. I saw our house for the last time before the water fell on us like a shadow. The mulberry tree in the garden, the corner where my mother was sewing, all disappeared under the water in a few seconds. I can still feel the lump in my throat. The children were crying. I couldn't look at my wife's face because at that moment I thought I couldn't save her. How can you say that to your own family? Villager, hoarse voice. We found a hill. We walked up it as fast as we could. When we looked back, our village was gone. The water had carried everything away. Houses, trees, dreams, and even people. We couldn't save our friends, our neighbours. The weight of survival is even greater than the weight of the water. Farmer in a whisper, they ask me, "What did you feel that night?" Feel? No, I didn't feel anything. I was just frozen. In that moment, I forgot to be human. The water took me not only from my home, but also from my heart. But I know, if I hadn't held my children's hands, I would have been lost. In August 1975, one of the greatest engineering disasters in human history occurred in Henan province, China, the Banqiao Dam disaster. The dam was built in the 1950s. It was designed to supply power to China's growing population and to prevent frequent flooding. It was considered so safe that it was dubbed the 1,000-year dam. That summer, however, things did not go as planned. In August 1975, Typhoon Nina struck the region. 3 days of non-stop rain dumped an entire year's worth of rain on the Banqiao Dam. The water level in the reservoir rose rapidly. Engineers managing the dam tried to open the sluice gates, but it was not enough. The pressure on the reservoir increased. It was just after midnight. Water seeping through the concrete walls signalled the first signs of a major disaster. And at that moment, that terrible sound was heard. The dam broke with tremendous force. A huge wall of water 15 metres high rushed toward the surrounding villages at 50 kilometres per hour. The water swept away everything in its path. Trees, houses, even people's lives. Some villages were totally destroyed. People desperately ran for their lives in the dark night. But many could not keep up with the speed of the water. The collapse of the Banqiao Dam was just the beginning. Its destruction set off a chain reaction that brought down a total of 62 other dams. 85 square kilometres were completely submerged. 26,000 people died in the floods. But the real tragedy began after that. The floods left hundreds of thousands of people homeless. Famine and epidemics swept through the region. The total death toll exceeded 230,000. The scale of the disaster was far greater than an act of nature. It was the result of a man-made mistake. The 1975 Banqiao Dam disaster has gone down in history as the result not only of nature, but also of man-made mistakes. Behind the disaster was a series of critical mistakes and a chain of negligence. The Banqiao Dam was originally built with great promise. It was designed in the 1950s to provide electricity for China's rapidly growing population and to control flooding. But design flaws in the project led to a major disaster years later. First, the design underestimated natural phenomena. The Banqiao Dam was designed to withstand the maximum annual rainfall, but in 1975, Typhoon Nina dumped a year's worth of rain on the region, in a matter of days. Such extremes were not taken into account when the dam was built. The second reason was that warnings were ignored. Meteorologists had predicted the size of the typhoon and the amount of rainfall it would bring. But this information was not taken seriously enough. Engineers and officials at the dam chose to wait instead of taking proactive measures against the risk of flooding. The third reason was the dam's structural weaknesses. At the time of construction, Banqiao appeared to meet the standards of the time. However, the quality of the materials used did not withstand prolonged overloading. As the pressure of the rain increased, the body of the dam began to crack, and those cracks eventually turned into a deadly collapse. The fourth cause was a lack of management of the dam. During the disaster, attempts were made to open the sluice gates, but there was a lack of coordination. There was a breakdown in communication between local authorities and engineers. Measures that could have been taken in time were not implemented because of these failures. With the collapse of Banqiao, 62 other dams collapsed. The floodwaters covered a vast area of 85 square kilometres, wiping entire villages off the map. In the first moments of the disaster, 26,000 people lost their lives in the floods. But that was just the beginning. The collapse of the dams led to a massive humanitarian crisis in the region. Hundreds of thousands of people were left homeless, and access to food and clean water was completely cut off. Epidemics began to spread rapidly. In the weeks that followed, an additional 145,000 people died of hunger and thirst. The total death toll exceeded 230,000. This was not just an act of nature, but a tragedy compounded by human error. The impact was not limited to these deaths. Farmland in the region was flooded, destroying annual crops. People struggled for years with hunger and economic devastation. It took decades to recover from the disaster. The economy of Henan province suffered a severe blow. It also had international repercussions. The Chinese government kept the scale of the disaster under wraps for years. But the truth eventually came out, providing important lessons for dam engineering and disaster management worldwide. But this was not just an accident, it was a tragedy that could have been prevented with the right measures. So what could have been done? The first and most important step could have been a more resilient design. The dam was built for the maximum annual rainfall. However, nature has shown us time and again that extraordinary circumstances are always possible. The dam should have been designed to withstand higher rainfall and pressure. Second, early warning systems could have been put in place. Meteorologists had predicted that Typhoon Nina would bring large amounts of rain to the region. However, these warnings were not taken seriously. If an effective early warning system had been in place, water levels could have been controlled and evacuations could have begun much earlier. Third, better maintenance and inspection were essential. The materials used to build the dam were not tested for long-term durability. Without regular maintenance, cracks and weak spots went undetected. In projects of this kind, continuous inspection and quality control are essential. Fourth, it was important to avoid negligence in flood management. The timely opening of sluice gates required strong coordination between local authorities and dam managers. This was not achieved during the disaster. Effective management could have significantly reduced the magnitude of the flood. Finally, an approach that prioritised human life should have been adopted. Villages in the area should have been educated about the potential risks, and evacuation plans should have been prepared in advance. As it was, people were left helplessly to their fate, not knowing how to respond to a disaster of this magnitude. The Banqiao Dam disaster has taught us that we cannot win against nature, but we can learn to work in harmony with it. With stronger designs, more effective management systems, and an approach that puts human life first, such disasters can be avoided.